Well, Gary, thanks. It's great to be back with you. It's been a rough few days, that's for sure. The snow stops and the cleanup continues, though. They're calling it the return of the big dig. This one, the Ice Age edition. Depending on where you're at, you might be looking at 2 to 3 feet of that white powdery stuff. Snow like we've never seen before. And all that stuff has to go somewhere. I hate to tell you. But now that the worst is out of the way, the travel ban is officially lifted. Now, snowplow drivers will have to share the roads with the rest of us. The T is also back up and running. Also, Logan Airport reopened around 7 o'clock Wednesday morning. Now, it's been a complete shutdown here in Boston up to this point, but I'm glad to be back with you. Now, the government offices, they're back up and running as well, but several schools still closed for precaution. Now, many of you have been braving those elements to go into work today, and good for you. If it's any comfort, though, check out this picture from astronaut Terry Virts. He tweeted this out showing the storm pattern moving over the Atlantic. They call this Storm Juno. Take a good look at it. Sounds apropos when you consider that's the capital of Alaska. Feels awful similar to that. You couldn't really tell the difference between Alaska and Boston these days. But closer to the coast, a lot of people won't forget this storm anytime soon. In fact, there's some serious disaster recovery to be done, and work crews can't even get started yet in many cases. Marshfield, one city that took a massive hit from this blizzard. Hurricane-type winds and waves came crashing over the rocks and the seawall, pummeling the houses and structures along the shore. In fact, the seawall came crashing down with the waves in many areas. Now all that water has to go somewhere. Much of it froze before it even had a chance to wash back toward the water. Now the situation in Scituate, even worse. That's a tongue twister for you. The fire chief is also the emergency manager for that town. He was forced to shut down power to homes along the coast. It was a preemptive move to avoid any fires from taking place. You might remember a few years back, a similar storm came across the coast, not quite as strong, but a huge gust of wind and water knocked out an electrical panel, and that sparked a fire. Obviously a big concern there, so that's the reason why they pulled the plug in this case. But for some time, many people were trapped inside their house with no power and no way to get out safely. You can see the waves crashing over the shoreline there, some waves as high as 25 feet. Now, since then, many of those people that were locked in were evacuated, several houses entirely encrusted in ice. Many people reported up to 6 feet of water in their basement. Could you imagine the way it would freeze and the damage that would do? Fortunately, no reports of any injuries to people. And on the Cape and Islands, they're still waiting in the aftermath of what looks like a hurricane just swept through. Water several feet high on Nantucket, houses flooded everywhere. Now the people over at NSTAR and National Grid have their hands full. At the peak of the storm, well over 100,000 people without power in the state. Most of those outages have been restored, but at least 12,000 people still without power. And get this, nearly half of those living on Nantucket. And plow drivers have been out in this since the very beginning. What a great job they're doing, by the way. You know, they say times like these often bring out the best in people. But as it turns out, that's not always the case. Police responded to emergency calls out at 124 Park Ave in Arlington. When they got there, they found a 60-year-old woman with a severely lacerated foot. And it didn't take long for the officers to arrest the woman's neighbor, 61-year-old Barbara Davis. Police say Davis got flustered at her neighbor during the blizzard and assaulted her with a snowblower. Now, the victim had actually filed a restraining order against Davis in the past. It turns out they've had quite the history, an ongoing dispute about their territory lines for some time now. You can just imagine how that could possibly play out with shoveling and who's responsible for what. Now, among other things, Davis now faces assault and battery charges. Another charge on that list, mayhem. Speaking of mayhem, you should see the scene out in Phoenix at the Super Bowl. The Patriots, they got out of here just in time. Don't worry about them. I'm sure the snow will still be left over when they get back in town. But for now, they're dealing with a storm of another kind, a media circus like you've never seen. Selfie sticks, GoPro cameras, crazy costumes, all a part of Super Bowl Media Day. A lot of the fun and games leading up to the big game. But that didn't stop a few intrepid reporters from leveling some of those hard-hitting questions at Tom Brady, trying to squeeze one more answer out of him about those deflated footballs.
Well, I'd say the only people that can affect the outcome of the game are the guys, in the locker room. So I think we bonded together. We have a lot of belief in one another. We have a belief in what we can accomplish. We made it a long way, and to be here is a great feeling for all of us. We'd love to go out there and play at our best and finish the job.
And that, folks, is exactly what you call a sidestep, a move Brady would likely try to use against the Seahawks pass rush as well. As for Coach Belichick, well, let's just say he's ready to move on.
Well, we're just focused on Seattle this week. That's it. So it's all about Seattle. It's all about us getting ready to play Sunday, and that's where all of our attention is. Not really worried about the rest of that.
That's Coach Belichick for you, clearly already in postseason form, and would you expect anything less? Well,